Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I think the primary task of the committee in considering this private bill is whether the bill is a private bill. We have thought about that, looked at the definition that's in our standing orders, and we consider that it is. Now, in coming to that conclusion, of course, we're merely following the long history from 1639, as Kezia referred to it, via the 1872 Act, which, although not in technical terms a private bill, clearly serves private purposes. So today's bill, being a private bill, is part of a continuum of the support that's given to people in Glasgow. Now, the promoter also considered, of course, whether they could use alternative ways of dealing with the issue that confronted them, whether they could use the charity reorganisation provisions set out in Chapter 5 of the Charities and Trustee Investment Scotland Act of 2005. That's something that's available to charities in some defined circumstances. But it does appear that there's some lack of clarity as to whether the Royal Incorporation of Hutchesons Hospital would meet the criteria. To test that, the committee sought the advice from an academic and from a QC. They are read in considerable detail in the committee's report. They are more fascinating than you might imagine, and I encourage all members to read them. But the bottom line is that the academic and the QC drew us to the conclusion that the committee who's promoting the private bill had come to, that they could not use the 2005 Act provisions reliably without the prospect of legal challenge. And so instead they have pursued what is before us today, which is the private bill. The consequences of a legal challenge, were one to arise, could be both financially and practically quite challenging. So I think the safe option that they've adopted, which the committee is happy to endorse, is to bring forward a private bill. Now, of course, that leads to an issue for the Scottish Government, which we deal with in our report, which is that perhaps the legislation that I referred to, the 2005 Act, should be revisited to see if we can provide greater clarity. Now, having said that, the Scottish Government has published a consultation on Scottish charity law in the last month with a view to possible update of the 2005 Act, and it includes a question that relates to the matter that I've just been referring to. So the preparation of consultation, of course, would have been well advanced, but nonetheless, the Hutchesons Committee are quite right to bring this forward in early course. Now, the other option, of course, is that they could hobble on with the existing 1872 legislation, and the 95 very largely indifferent people who were on the committee. Indeed, there was some suggestion that many of the 95 people who were on the committee were not even aware of the fact that were on the committee, including, as it does, all Glasgow's councillors, and many ministers of religion who simply by their office end up legally and formally being on the committee. So we didn't come to the conclusion that doing nothing made sense, because I think the trustees made a pretty cogent argument that we should look at updating and modernising the 1872 arrangements and bringing it into the world that we now have, with oversight of OSCA, the Office of Charities Regulator, and an SCIO. So having considered the alternatives, we are content with the promoter's conclusion that a private bill is the most appropriate and best available method of achieving its aims. So we're left with one question alone, and that is, how will we adjudge success of this parliamentary process? And I think the key test is that for the beneficiaries of this trust, they see no difference whatsoever, that it continues to provide the support that they have enjoyed for some time, the support which was described in the 1872 Act based on the mortification of George Hutcheson of 1639, which said, aged, decrepit men may be entered and placed therein. Now, I'm aged, but hopefully not decrepit, but I was particularly excited by the provision that there'd be 4 shillings Scottish money every day, and every year a gown of convenient colour. before we get too excited, 4 shillings sounds a lot of money, but in today's money, because it's Scots pounds, not the English pound, and decimalisation, that is in modern currency tuppence. I know that beneficiaries get a little bit more than that today. This process should, and I believe will, enable them to continue to receive these benefits in proper legal form.